Hi guys, now and girls. Hi guys and girls. I'm glad to be back after a long holiday. I'm going to be taking you for a ride, historical ride. You're going for a historical ride. This historical ride is going to take you to the Harappan civilization. So 9th standard, tighten your shoes and your belts and get ready for the ride, because you're going to cry after the ride is over. I have made 2 assignments. These assignments are going to be for you. You have to answer the questions that I have given in your assignment, and more than that, you have to read the lesson. Reading the lesson is very important, and this is because you don't read the lesson, you will not know the answers. You read the lesson, and along the way you can answer the questions that have been put up to you. So, we are going to the Harappan civilization. Let us take a ride and go to the civilization. It is this civilization is supposed to be an advanced stage of human culture. This Harappan civilization is an advanced stage of human culture. Now, in this, it implies that there was a superior use of technology, and there was complex economic standards, and there were also complex relationships. Some of the traits which mark this civilization, there are 6 traits that mark this civilization. The 6 traits are: it was the evolution of new cities. So, new cities evolved, surplus food, because first they used to go around searching for food. They were gatherers and hunters, and after being gatherers and hunters, obviously they started becoming agriculturists when they found out about fire and water and the earth, and they started growing food. So, when they started cultivation, that is, they did cultivation in large quantity, they had surplus food. So, when they had surplus food, they would barter that food, they would give that food, the produce, to another person, and they would take what that person gave them in return. So, that was the surplus food. Then you have division of labor, and you have this system of writing and public buildings, development of technology. Division of labor, when they started cultivation, they had more free time. They divided labor, and when they divided labor, each and every person had free time. So, anyone could take up a particular occupation in their free time. So, this was division of labor. Then they started the system of writing. System of writing was done to keep a track of what they were doing. So, this was also very important. They were very clever, and they started writing. But till today, nobody knows they cannot depict what the writings are about. They have it on the seals in the Harappan and Mohenjo-daro, but historians are not able to depict what it is all about. And so, the writings are clueless to us. But for instance, Ashoka's writings and all that, they could make out what it was, and they found out the alphabets and all in those days, and they found the lipi, and they translated what was written. Public buildings. These people were very public oriented, and they were very systematic. They had a lot of knowledge on building, construction. So, they were very particular, and they had this culture. This culture, why we call it the complex economic culture, is because they believed in the higher rung and the lower rung. So, these people, the higher rung, they had these public buildings, and then in the lower part, we will come to that, which we call the citadel. So, the citadel is a place where which was within the city limits. So, outside the city limits, the poor people and the peasants and the poor people, and they lived outside the city limits. Then you come, there is a wall, the wall built in the citadel. In the citadel, they had the lower caste and then the higher caste. So, this was the public buildings and development of technology. So, they developed technology. Imagine, these people used gypsum, they used bitumen, and they built. They used technology. They were good in science and technology. Now, this is what they were. So, these are the 6 traits. These are the 6 traits that evolved the Harappan civilization. The period between 4000 and 3000 BC, it saw remarkable progress. Man acquired greater knowledge and skill. Over here, he mastered forces of using tools efficiently. So from stone he went to metal. So he mastered the art. From stone he shifted to metal, and he moved on from living in, from being a nomad, from moving from place to place. He moved down and settled at the banks of the river to a complete settled life, and that is what formed a settlement. They all started living on the bank of the river, and they all settled down, and they did cultivation and all that, and that was called the settlement. So this evolved first into towns, and then the same settlements, they moved on, and they moved on to towns, and then from towns they moved on to cities. Now the river valleys and the agricultural potential to support the dense population and produce surplus food. So when they settled at the banks of the river valley helped them. The water of the river and the valley where they lived helped them to cultivate and to produce surplus food. The surplus food freed the people. As I said earlier I did mention that when they started cultivation, they had more free time, because there was equal distribution of labor. So this free time, it gave them surplus food, freed some of the people to form tasks of their own choice. It gave them time to form tasks of their own choice. Some became specialists in particular things, and some developed a substantial range of new skills. Some people developed skills like writing, they learned how to use metal, they learned how to make different alloys, they also learned making large scale constructions, and such knowledge and skill, this enabled the people to advance. This helped the people to advance from one step to another step and to move forward. That is why the Harappan civilization is known to be one of the most cultured civilizations in the history of India. Now, this same thing was the Bronze Age civilization. So we call it the Harappan civilization moved on to the Bronze Age civilization. We have the Stone Age. The Stone Age is where they use stone tools and all that. And then they moved on gradually from using stone tools. They came to know about the metals, because they lived on the banks of the rivers, and there's where they found copper. They found nuggets of copper, and that is what they used, and they learned about the metal, and they heated it when they threw it, and when it accidentally fell into the fire, I suppose that might have been the thing, that it fell into the fire and it started dissolving with the heat, and that when it started dissolving, they realized that this is some kind, and when the fire went off and they tried to pick it up, it turned hard again, and that made them realize that it is a kind of a metal which can be dissolved and can be remade. So that is when they started making tools. They used for making a variety of tools, implements and weapons. The first metal to be discovered was copper, as I said earlier on. So that is why it's called the Bronze Age. For a long time, these implements were made out of copper tools, and this was known as the Chalcolithic period. This period of the Bronze Age was called the Chalcolithic period. This Chalcolithic period is very important because it is a stepping stone from the Stone Age into the Bronze Age, Copper Age. Then later on, man also learned in this same Chalcolithic period, they learned how to mix copper and metal. So he started mixing copper and metal and zinc, and he produced zinc. He mixed copper and zinc, and he produced an alloy which was called bronze, and that made them more smarter. So that is why this is called the Bronze Age. And in this age, because of the importance of bronze in the growth of the first civilization, they were the first civilization. These civilizations are also known as Bronze Age civilization. So the Harappa civilization is very, very close to the Bronze Age civilization. Everything starts from there. In about 2500 BC, 4 Bronze Age civilizations. So now this Bronze Age civilization began in 2500 BC. Okay, as I said earlier on, the Harappan, they evolved in the 4000, the period between 4000 to 3000 BC. They were around in that BC. So it's not hardly 500 short. the 4 bronze civilizations emerged. The first civilization that emerged in the 2500 BC was the Harappan civilization. This was in the northern and the western parts of India and Pakistan. That was the first civilization that emerged. The second was the Mesopotamian. The Mesopotamian civilization. Mesopotamian civilization was on the banks of the river Euphrates. So this civilization, it was on the banks of the river Euphrates and Tigris, 2 rivers. So that was in modern Iraq. So they call it the Mesopotamian. Then the Chinese civilization. This civilization started in the valley of Huang. So Huang is the river Huang Ho and the Yangtze River. So these were the 2, the Huang Ho and the Yangtze River saw the Chinese civilization. Then we move on to the second most powerful civilization, which is very close to the Harappan and the Egyptian civilization, the Harappan civilization. That is called the Egyptian civilization. They settled on the banks of the river Nile. So these were the major 4 civilizations. So we are very lucky to be one of the 4. The one of the 4 is the Harappan and Harappan civilization. Is one civilization that is very good. Now, so if you look at your book, all of you all do have books. So if you look at your book, I have explained the first page of your lesson. I have explained the first page of your lesson. So now let's move on to the second page. The second page is the Harappan civilization. It's all about Harappan civilization. So it's just a small passage that's telling you about the Harappan civilization and what it is all about. Then we have the sources. So let's finish with the Harappan civilization. So this is on your page number 6. The discovery of the Indus civilization, which was done in the 20th century, was very important event in the history of India. This event was, up to that time, it was believed in the history that India began because of the advent of the Aryans. That is what belief we have. We feel that the Aryans were the ones to bring India into the map. That it means the Aryans belong to the northern part of India. However, the discovery of the Harappan civilization, which stretched back the origin from Indian history, so it put it par with one of the oldest civilizations. It was in par with one of the oldest civilizations, namely the Mesopotamian civilization. The Indus Valley is best known as the Harappan culture or the Harappan civilization. So you can call the Indus Valley civilization has another name. Indus Valley civilization is known as the Harappan civilization or the Harappan culture. So it has 3 names. It has it's called the Indus Valley civilization, Harappan culture and Harappan civilization. So the term culture is used, as the archaeologists say, that the term culture is used for a group of objects which is distinctive. A term culture over here means a group of objects which is distinctive in style. It is distinctive in style, and that is usually found within a specific geographical area and a specific period of time. That's the meaning of culture. In the case of Harappan culture, these distinctive objects that give us style are the seals. How we know? Seals, weights, stone blades. Then we have got baked bricks. We have the style of the building layout, their building layouts, their town planning, their city planning. So all this we'll come to. So this was discovered in 1912 at the modern site of Harappa. So this civilization was found in 1921 at the modern site of Harappa, and it's situated in the province of West Punjab in present day Pakistan. Okay, Mohenjo-daro was discovered in 1922. Now Mohenjo-daro, Harappa civilization and Mohenjo-daro lies both in the Indus Valley region. So actually Mohenjo-daro is also part of India. Harappan civilization in Mohenjo-daro, we have part of it in India and part of it in Pakistan. That is because of our wonderful partition, since we divided India into Pakistan and India. So we have sources. Now we move on to sources. There are various sources. So according to the knowledge given by the historians, there are many sources that tell us about this civilization. So sources means the thing that gives us information. We have the great bath, we have the seals, we have the bearded man, we have the dancing girl, we have dockyards, we have granary, the citadel. So these are the different sources. There are and script. So we have 7 different sources. The 7 different sources that give us information on Harappan civilization. So this is all that gives us information. The first one is the Great Bath. The Great Bath is a bath is known. It's called the Great Bath because it is one of the largest public buildings that was built in the Harappan era. And it was a huge rectangular tank, and it was surrounded with a courtyard on all 4 sides. It had steps leading down to the tank on 2 sides, on the north side and the southern side. And it also had, the beauty of it is that it had watertight walls. It had watertight walls, and the walls did not leak. Then they also had the watertight walls were made out of burnt brick. Burnt brick, and they were made out of mortar, which was lined with bitumen and gypsum. So these were what was used for the construction. The water for the bath, eventually it came in, and it provided it came into the water from a well that was in a room. There was a room, and in that room they found a well. The water supplied to the bath was from the well. So here the water for the bath was provided by a well in an adjacent room. Surrounding the bath there were porticos. There were a lot of different porticos and the sets of rooms. There were a whole lot of set of rooms and a stairway which led to the first floor. So they had built a first floor at that time, which was called, we call it first floor, but in the olden days they called it the upper story, okay, and the lower story, because there were only 2 stories that were built. Buildings were only of 2 stories, upper story and lower story. Now we have got floors. We've got 4th floor, 5th floor, 8th floor. Some scholars believe that these rooms were provided for members. Now they had this bath, the Great Bath, and the bath water was also, they had also a place where the water could be secreted out. The water could be removed, the dirty water could be removed from the bath could be cleansed, and fresh water again put into the bath. So they were very good at construction. Now because of the many rooms around the bath and the first floor on top, the historians didn't know why there were so many rooms that were built along the bath, on the 4 sides of the bath. These, the historians, they feel that it was provided for members for changing their clothes. Provided to members for changing their clothes. Now, who are these members? These members, according to the historians, they feel that they belong to the priesthood, or they could be members of a higher class and scholars, and or they more or less, the historians thought that it was like a kind of a spiritual kind of a structure, which was spiritual, and where people would have a ritual bath. Ritual means it was something to do with religion, and they would have their rituals done. Now, this is a very weird kind of way that I am explaining this to you, the Great Bath and the importance of the Great Bath. But it's true, it's very true. Today, if you do want to see something built on the same lines as what is in Harappa, we have a living monument in our midst, and especially since we are in Pune, we have a living monument of this in our midst. This is at Trimbakeshwar at Nashik. If you go there at Nashik, there is Trimbakeshwar. There they have this house. This house is built on the same thing. It has steps going down into the water, and it has rooms all around, and those rooms are used for changing. These people also, it is used as a ritual. So before your puja and before you do your havan and your home and your puja and all that, people go there. You are supposed to go there, have your morning bath in that room, in that water, take a dip in that water, which is supposed to be fresh spring water which comes up, and so that water is not dirty, because it's like flowing water, and they have the outlets where this water continuously flows out to canals, and fresh water keeps coming up every day. So you go there, you have your bath, and then you come out, and then you go to the rooms, and you can use it as a changing room. And this is also a very deep one at Trimbakeshwar. So this gives you kind of an idea of what a bath is and what it is used for. In Trimbakeshwar, they use it for, before you sit down for your daily ritual, you have to have, it's compulsory, you have to have a dip in that bath. So probably in days gone by in the Harappan civilization, they did it for the same reason. The priests and the priesthood and the people did it for the same reason, means it could have been like a ritual bath that they had. Now the construction of the great bath indicates that the art of building had reached a very high degree of perfection. So if you look at the construction, it tells us that at that time, during the Harappan civilization, the people, the art of building had reached a very high degree of level. The level was very high, and the degree of perfection, it was practically a degree of perfection. The massive structure points out that there might be, they might have existed a ruling class. Now this big structure that they built, this surely tells us that there could have been a ruling class of people. This ruling class could have mobilized labor, that means it tells us that the Harappans were rulers. They might have had a class of people who were rulers, and these people, they mobilized laborers. Mobilized laborers means they got hold of the laborers and they made them build the tank, the great bath. So they mobilized the laborers, they got the laborers to build the baths. Now to get the laborers to build the baths, they needed to pay the laborers. So this tells us also that they had knowledge of collecting taxes. So they were very good at collecting taxes, because they needed time, they needed money to build and to pay for such a huge structure, and the structure is very huge. So most of the scholars agree that the great bath might have been used for religious purpose. This indicates the importance also attached to ceremonial bathing in sacred tanks, pools, rivers, since time immemorial. So we also, till today also, we follow the same religion. We also have ceremonial bathing. It's going on from time immemorial. From our great grandfathers, it is brought down generation by generation by generation, and even today also we do this. We do jump into the lake, like in the Ganga, and to the lake. Right? That was Bhagwat uncle. You know how irritating he can be, You all know him very well, children. So it's nice to see him. Sorry for the interruption. The design of the great bath portrays the efficient planning of the structure, the features relating to water supply and sewage. So the way the bath was designed, this tells us that they were very good in science, because it related to the structure of the water coming in from the well into the bath, and the dirty water being sent out from the bath into the canals, right out of the city. So there it tells us that scientifically also they were very good. Now we move on to the citadel, which is your second source. The citadel is also, it's a raised area. In this raised area of each city was called the citadel. So Harappan civilization had civilizations in many cities. They had it in Lothal, they had it in Chandrapur, they had it in many cities in India. So each city had a citadel. Now this citadel was, it was raised at a height of a building, and it was constructed on mud brick platform. So the platform was made, and the whole city was on a mud brick platform. So the platform was made with mud and bricks. The citadel, it housed different buildings. So the first one, it had the houses of the ruling class. All the ruling class people lived in the citadel, and important buildings like the great bath lay in the citadel, the granary, the assembly hall, and workshops. So there were 5 things that were in the citadel. The main thing was that it ruled the housing class. All the rich and the famous and the learned people, the scientists, the tax collectors, and the kings and his men, all the learned people lived in the citadel. All those that who ruled the city lived in the citadel. So they had the ruling class, they had the great bath, and they had the granary because they had cultivation. So the excess produce was kept in granaries. The granaries had to be kept well so that the grains wouldn't go bad. The assembly hall and the workshop. Now the citadel points to the elaborate planning that went into the development of the city. This justifies the citadel. The citadel is a great justification for us. It justifies that the Harappan civilization was an urban civilization. The Harappan civilization was an urban civilization. It wasn't a rural civilization. Rural civilization, they are hunters and gatherers, and they move from one place to another and all that. But urban, they started turning urban because they settled in one place and they started building things, and they started building a community, and this community slowly led to being built into cities. So this is what the Harappan civilization tended to be. It tended to be an urban civilization. The presence of specific buildings and houses of the ruling class indicated some sort of social classification. So this presence tells us of the ruling class. The presence in the citadel of the ruling class tells us that they did have a classification of classes during that time. So they did have, like, the higher class, the lower class, the upper class, the lower class. So they did have a kind of a classification. We move on to the next one is seals. Seals were basically used by the Harappans to show their artistic skills. They showed their artistic skills by using seals. Now these seals were we found about 2000 seals. They have been, 2000 seals have been found. Of these, a great majority, they comprise some of the inscriptions which with pictures. All their seals had a little inscription and they had pictures. So it's called pictorial seals. It is called pictorial seals. So these seals, they had pictures like of one-horned rhino, the bull, the buffalo, the tiger, the goat, the elephant. All these animals they had on their seals. Oh, and even the rhinoceros was found on one seal. So these seals were made, and these were made of a material called terracotta. They used terracotta at that time. So imagine, they knew how to make clay into terracotta, and they made the seals out of terracotta. Now over here, the same terracotta, and they used steatite. They used steatite agate. Steatite agate is also another kind, and they used agate. So steatite and agate. So they knew terracotta, steatite and agate. So these were the different materials that they were used. Most of the seals are rectangular or square. Some of them even some of them were circular. The circular ones had a hole in it, and they passed a thread through it. So the circular ones were like kind of a payment given, or it was like a kind of a adornment to show that they belong to a particular society. So it could be that, or it could be given in lieu of payment given. So nobody knows of why they had those circular ones. Harappan seals provided information about scripts. The Harappan seals gave us information about the scripts, okay? But unfortunately, we can't read it, so we don't have any written scriptures. They couldn't write. They couldn't write also at one point of time because they had only a limited amount of words. So there were no scriptures. It tells us about the trade, and it tells us about their religion and their beliefs. So they found seals. Why I am saying religion is because they found seals of Pashupati god. They found seals of Pashupati, and it is believed in, and they found seals of Shiva. Certain seals had Shiva, so they believed in Lord Shiva, and they had this seals of Pashupati were found. It shows that the three-faced deity wearing a buffalo horned headdress. Now this three-faced deity, which is wearing a buffalo horned headdress and is seated cross-legged.